And hello, Dodgers fans.
We're
We're
back.
back.
It's like they never left, but they're back. Even though that was rough for the last couple days. It's your boy Alonzo. My friend Juan is here with us. Juan, how do you feel after last night to today?
I feel so good, buddy. Let me tell you something. Dodgers needed that game, but more importantly, the Dodger fans needed that game. Because I had to pull out my Dodger poncho. Okay, this is the playoff poncho. I only wear this in the playoffs, and we desperately needed it tonight. It made my apartment feel like it was 100 degrees, but I don't care. I sweated through it because they needed it after that first inning. I knew everything was going to be great. That was a hell of a game the Dodgers needed.
And I mean, Max Muncy coming in huge, 2 for 4 with the grand slam. And that dude stepped up and carried the thing. But however, for me, obviously this is going to be all about all the runs. For me, what was the thing that really just ignited everything? First pitch. Mookie Betts getting on base and just getting it going with that call being overturned. That was the difference maker in what ended up essentially being an 11-run rally to where we are tonight, where it ended up being 15-3. Poor Kyle Wright. I mean, he got lit up. Didn't make it out of the first. 94.5 ERA with his appearance tonight. He got robbed. But to your point, the Dodgers and the Dodger fans for sure needed that because this is the Dodgers team that everyone expected to see this, not only in the wild card and NLCS, but in the NLCS. This is the team that they expected to see against this Braves team. And all the props in the world to these guys, for going out there and really carrying the momentum in from last night to today. And obviously, there was a little bit of garbage time today as far as how they ended up using some guys off of the bench. Everyone emptied the benches. But essentially, when I knew that they conceded is when they brought in Freddie, or when they took out Freddie Freeman and when they took out Darno. That's essentially when it was like, okay, we're done. We're going to move ahead to tomorrow. So going into, obviously, for you, obviously I mentioned the Mookie Betts thing. What do you think was kind of the turning point for you as far as this Dodgers team getting it going in that first inning?
Well, I mean, it's what we talked about last post, right? It's just the Dodgers needed to score. They needed to score first. They were the visitors. They were going to be up first. They needed to jump on them, and they needed to put up runs. So Julio could pitch for the lead. So for me, honestly, I thought they looked a lot looser in game 2 from the 7th inning on. And it seems like maybe seeing Mookie out there hustling. I mean, Freeman made a hell of a play on that ball. And made that play a lot closer than maybe than what it should. But this is what I liked about it. I mean, they went back to hitting home runs. I don't know if they're just they're also, I mean, let's be honest. The drop-off in pitching with Atlanta, I think, was obvious today. Okay? Freeman and Anderson, even Anderson not pitching very well. Those guys are studs. And Atlanta's future's looking really bright. Now you put in Kyle Wright. I mean, now you can see how hard of a game baseball is. When you have pitchers that pitch really well, they can be good hitters. Like ridiculous, right? And now Kyle Wright went in there, and unfortunately, he had to answer for the Dodgers' wrath. So for me, I really like the Dodgers' approach. It seemed like they weren't. I feel like they try to work the count. It kind of makes them passive. They still had that approach, but I think they were missing the mistakes that Kyle Wright made. I think it's as simple as that. Those pitches were right over the plate, and they hammered.
Well, and on 16 hits, 5 of those hits were home runs today. And so they didn't, you can say that they relied a little bit on the home run ball, but obviously they started it with small ball, and they were able to kind of keep that going. And like you said, they made Kyle pay for it. And Kyle himself, he's no slouch either. He's got good stuff. He has a nasty, when it's on, he's got some nasty breaking balls, but it's just one of those things where the Dodgers made him super uncomfortable. And for me, what was another big thing was how the Braves players themselves looked like you had said yesterday, they'd been kicked just right in the balls. Like they didn't know what had happened. They're like, what's going on? Like they didn't know really how to react. And that's a testament to what the Dodgers did today, going out there and being aggressive, right out the gate. And Corey Seager, who's white hot going in right now. Obviously doing his part with 3 RBIs and just doing it all. Really, when you kind of look at it, even in that first inning when he fielded those 2 plays, outstanding job. So I mean, it's right now. I think this is kind of that momentum shift, obviously, that the Dodgers needed. But most importantly, I think they all remember we can all hit. No one's worried or tense or anything like that. Because like we talked for the last couple of games, these Dodger hitters, players really, not even just the hitters, the pitchers themselves, they looked a little tense. They didn't look loose. And today, obviously, after you get a little bit of a lead, you tend to loosen. But after an 11-run lead, which obviously is a postseason record now, a 32-minute, first half of the inning, that is, they were incredibly loose. Cody was celebrating. Edwin Rios, 1 pitch, 1 bomb. That's the sort of stuff that you kind of see in those situations. And let's not forget, playoff Jock is back. Those people that have doubted playoff Jock being a thing, here he is. So, it's good to see playoff Jock is back and doing the thing. And you can't fault the Dodgers for going out there and just kind of rocking it. How did you feel about Julio's start?
It was a little shaky. Before I go to Julio, I just want to add one thing about what I liked about the Dodgers' approach at the plate. If you saw, they were going opposite field, and I think that's a really good sign. When you see the Dodgers starting to go opposite field, I feel like they have good control over the plate. They know where their zone is. Jock going opposite field, Corey Seager going opposite field, so that was very encouraging. Julio, he wasn't perfect. I would have loved if he would have given us an extra inning. He would have given us those 6. He struggled. He couldn't put the breaks away. He couldn't put those hitters away. They kept fouling pitches off. That was a little concerning because I would like to see him develop and start finishing these people off because I think that will lower his pitch count. In those first 3 innings, he was averaging about 20 pitches an inning. But then in that 4th and 5th inning, he really hunkered down. But by then, he was already over 100 pitches. So, yeah, Julio wasn't perfect. But again, I think it's very different pitching with a lead than when it's a tie game or it's a close game. You can afford to make mistakes. You can afford to take more chances. And I think what Julio did today was just a solid job that a professional would do. Was just struggle, get out of the inning, get the outs, just avoid the big inning, and he did what we needed right now. It would have been nice to see him go 6, but I'll take the 4.
Well, and to me, I think postseason starts, when people talk about quality starts, I think, a quality postseason start to a quality regular season start are 2 different things. And I would almost classify what Julio did tonight as a quality postseason start. You went out there and you gave him 5 innings. He struck out 5. Obviously, he gave up that home run to Pache, so he had the 1 earned run. He walked 2. So not pedestrian numbers by any stretch. He went out and once a big thing to remember is that first inning he sat for 32 minutes.
Yes.
You went out, you warmed up, you did your routine before any start or whatever the case may be, and then you sat for half an hour. Obviously going from sitting to okay, now it's go time. It's going to take you a minute to adjust, and you could tell he was having that period of adjusting to get a feel for everything, right? But once he got in that groove, he was in that groove, and he had bite on all of his pitches. He looked really, really comfortable, and he, in my opinion, that's a quality start. From there, we transitioned to the dude that's been the elephant in the room, Kenley Jansen. Kenley Jansen went out and threw an inning on 10 pitches. The velocity isn't necessarily there still, but they did talk about, they've talked openly kind of that they've been working on his mechanics. Obviously, they're not going to say what they're working on, but they've been working on those mechanics, and he looked relatively a lot more comfortable, out there in comparison to how he's looked previously. What was your takeaway from that appearance?
Well, I think he didn't give up a hit, right?
He did not. No.
So I think the important thing was he had a clean inning. Okay, it wasn't a dominant inning, but it was a clean inning, and that's a start. I think that what Kenley needed to do was he needed to experience a clean inning. He needed to experience something that wasn't a disaster to try to get his head back in the right place. So for me, I mean, honestly, I mean, when you're up, when you have an 11-run lead, it really does, reduce your stress. So I was just hoping that Kenley would go in there and get the outs. And, I mean, this is going to be a process because it was funny. We were talking about this last night, you and I, that we don't expect any blowouts. And look what happened. We got our first blowout in the series, right? So this was the perfect time to go ahead and bring Jansen in. They got to bring in Baez again. Get these guys to work on it, get these guys to hopefully have short memories because we are going to need these guys to come up big, especially since, we had talked about how these games, 3 and 4, are games that the Dodgers need to take advantage of to get back into the series because the further this series goes, the momentum might shift back to the Braves because right now, the way the Braves have their pitching set up, we're looking at Max Fried and we're looking at Anderson in games 6 and 7. And, we can't expect Anderson, even though he pitched solidly, but, I mean, it wasn't what we normally see from Ian Anderson during these playoffs. So we have to be prepared. He might come out and be dominant, and what is the Dodgers offense going to do to counter that? So I was glad to see Jansen pitch clean and Baez bounce back.
And to your point, with the Braves, potentially getting a momentum shift, if you will, that 9th inning, obviously we know what happened last night in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. The Braves had something cooking there a little bit. Granted, the scoreline was obviously significantly different, but I mean that kind of further proves to you though as to why you need to have, you can't take the foot off the gas. If they would have had, a 5-run inning and let's say it's 7-5. Obviously that's a little close for comfort. Obviously it was, 15-3, but nonetheless, that shows you, the grit that the Braves had. Because granted, again, they took out Freddie, they took out Darnell. They made those changes and gave some guys, essentially they are wanting to keep their guys healthy, and the Dodgers did the same. But it's even with what they have, they have the depth in their lineup as well, to challenge those guys. Kolarek, giving up the 3 hits and gave up the 2 runs there in the 9th. So it's one of those things where, hey, you can't, the Dodgers are still down 2-1, right? But the series has changed. For me, though, regardless, because of kind of the outcome of this game, the series feels different now. It almost feels like the Dodgers are ahead, all things considered, even though the Braves are up 2-1. But like we were saying last night, if they go down 3-0, it's one of those things where it's even harder to come out of. Now, it's a whole new series. And going into tomorrow, we know Clayton Kershaw is more than likely going. They know that's the guy. On the other side, the Dodgers will be facing Bryce Wilson, who's had a pretty good year. Not a you wouldn't say a stud, but definitely a guy that's that 4th, 5th starter in a rotation of sorts. But a guy nonetheless that has good stuff. As they go ahead, what are you kind of expecting out of this Dodger lineup tomorrow?
I hope they come out with that same sense of urgency because, again, even if Kershaw makes the start tomorrow, I don't know what to expect from Kershaw. I mean, that back of his can act up again. We might be able to only get 1 or 2 innings, or he might start getting hit hard. So, again, I think the key, and I'm glad that, again, the Dodgers are going to be the visitors tomorrow. I think they need to be able to jump on these guys again to try, in case Kershaw is not, if he's not healthy or if Kershaw's a little shaky, it's nice to have that little cushion there. So I'm hoping that they just go out there with the same approach and turn, Bryce into the same pitcher that the Braves threw out there today. So the sense of urgency is what I want because, like you just mentioned right now, even though the series does feel different, the Dodgers could very easily be up 2-1. The Dodgers could be up 3-0. I'm sure, with the exception of this game because the Braves just weren't in it. But, if things go a different way, if in that 9th inning Blake Treinen finds a way to get out of it, do the Dodgers come back and win that game? Last night's game, the Dodgers came back. Those runs that they gave up that we thought were meaningless because the game was out of reach ended up becoming a big difference in the game because it ended up being a 1-run game. So this series could very easily be Dodgers 2-1. So it does definitely feel like a different series. So for me, it's just important that they don't get too comfortable because tomorrow the game starts 0-0 again. okay? And there's always that fear that when you have these games where you score a lot of runs, it's like, hey, save some for tomorrow, right? I mean, I was in a group chat with my friends, and after the first inning, when it was 11-0, they were all still petrified that the Dodgers were going to blow this game. That's how traumatized Dodger fan is, that even though we have an 11-run lead, it's like, okay, how are we going to blow this? So I hope the Dodgers don't take their foot off the gas pedal and then just tomorrow just come out with that same approach, and that is get on base. Look what happened in that first inning. We had runners on base, and it forced those pitchers, those Braves pitchers, to make mistakes. And for the first time in the series, the Dodgers cashed in on those mistakes.
And right as we, again, we were talking about the momentum shift. Again, it feels like a totally different series. And for those of you joining us here on after the game with myself, Alonso, and Juan, thank you for joining us on after a defiant 15-3 comeback victory for the Dodgers. And when I say comeback, we have to remember they're still down 2-1. So there's still more work to be done. And to your point, Juan, the visiting component, I think, is going to be huge, because the Dodgers are visitors not only tomorrow but for Game 5. So it's the 2-3-2 format in the NLCS, and also it would be the same in the World Series. So that'll be interesting to see if the Dodgers advance as well. If this is something that maybe they prefer or what have you, but be that as it may, the Dodgers have the offense firing on all cylinders. And and I saw some tweets out there on the in the Dodger Twitterverse that a lot of people were concerned about kind of how flat the Dodgers got, if you will, after after that high intensity first half of the game. I get why the Dodgers did what they did tonight, where they put some guys out there and they kept a bunch of those guys out there. They put Beatty out there. They didn't. They moved everyone kind of around a little bit defensively. Austin Barnes came in. Kike came in. They gave Pollock essentially the night off. I get why they did a lot of that, because they wanted to keep some of these guys going. They obviously Max Muncy has, I guess he's kind of been in a slump, if you will. Cody Ballinger for sure had, the slow start, and now he's starting to heat up. Hit that home run tonight, and he himself on the night he had 2 hits. So he's definitely starting to heat up. And of course, Seager, obviously they want to keep him white hot. They're trying to get Chris Taylor going. They're trying. Obviously, Jock Peterson he's playoff Jock. That's the truth. Justin Turner, who's he's got the ailing hamstring. That's why he DH'd tonight, trying to keep him off of his legs. So it was definitely strategic in the sense that they have that that pad, and everyone can play a little loose. But at the same time, they wanted to give everyone an opportunity to kind of get the reps in, if you will. But talking about Jock, how did you feel about Jock's performance tonight?
I mean, he was great. I mean, Jock in the second game, he was missing his pitches, right? And again, it's what I mentioned to you before. When Jock goes opposite field, he's got that opposite field power. I feel that that's an approach that works for him, because going opposite field keeps your head in the box. I feel that sometimes Jock, with that big swing of his, pulls his head's all over the place, the helmet's coming off. So I was really pleased to see Jock going opposite field and seeing a lot of these guys go opposite field. I mean, Edwin Rios, we know that guy can match. If he gets a hold of one, it's going to go far. But dead center in that ballpark, I mean that was huge. Again, I really hope that the Dodgers offense keeps this approach, because it's the pressure that was finally applied to the Braves. And now we'll see how the Braves respond, because, again, this is a good team, okay? So we can't take anything for granted. I know we're feeling great right now because the Dodgers are now showing signs of what we've seen all season. Now, let's see how the Braves respond tomorrow.
Well, and with your point on that, too, Cody Ballinger, with not only the home run, had a fantastic defensive play when he robbed Ozzie Albies of that home run. And that was a ball that very easily, in my opinion, was a home run. Because in that ballpark, I mean, anything, obviously the Muncy ball and the Cody ball, those are no doubters. But some of those balls, it looks like they were carrying, right? And in my opinion, that would have been a home run. And for Cody to go out and make that defensive play, not only did it help as far as the momentum was going at that point, but it's showing that Cody is turning it on at the right time. And that's what the Dodgers need at this point is, obviously there's been the struggles of Max and him and now they're starting to get warmed up with everything. And Max himself, on 4 at bats, he had 2 hits, 4 RBI, 2 walks. So him doing his part, and that was that was one thing that I was actually happy to see when you kind of look at the box score. The Dodgers, they had 2 walks all night, which is fantastic, and 10 strikeouts. Those are kind of like those unseen stats that you see in a blowout game that are important going into tomorrow, because obviously at some point Dave, was starting to get his managing, if you will, ready for tomorrow. They're looking ahead. That's why they're pulling guys and making the moves that they're making and resting some of the guys. And one thing that I was that was kind of interesting to see is when the Braves essentially conceded when they pulled Freeman and Darnell. And obviously those have been their horses, but obviously they have a couple other guys that they can rely heavily on. But for me though, the big thing tonight is them striking out Ozuna the 3 times in that 3 hole, because then it lets them just kind of relax when they start at the top of the lineup, because then they're not having to force the task at hand. For me though, like I said, and we talked about this, is the thing that we've talked a ton about is seeing the bullpen do what they did tonight. Aside from the Choleric appearance, the Dodger bullpen needed that clean, those clean outings to be able to kind of like, okay, similar to that offense, get it going. Because this Dodgers bullpen, obviously we know what they're capable of, and they're good. Everyone is touted them as one of the better bullpens that the Dodgers have had during this run. And for me, compared to last night to tonight, night and day Pedro Baez. How did you feel about Pedro and Alex Wood's appearances? Because again, 2 guys that went last night didn't have a lot of success, but tonight 2 different guys.
I thought Alex Wood looked really good, and but the thing is, and this is why again I thought it was important that Urias give us some length, because this is going to be my prediction was this is a 7-game series. The more these Braves hitters start seeing the Dodgers bullpen, the same way we feel confident about the Dodgers seeing the Braves bullpen. I mean, if our starters don't start giving us length, it might start. I mean, these are major league hitters. These are professional hitters, right? The bullpen can't be perfect. Usually in a regular season, you're not going to see a team's whole bullpen in a 3-game series. But in a 7-game series, you're going to see the whole bullpen, and you're going to see the bullpen on a regular basis. So it was nice to see Wood bounce back and to see Baez bounce back. So hopefully that gives, we didn't have to use our high leverage guys today, which I think is important. But at the same thing, one thing I do want to point out here is I have to commend Brian Snitker, because I think he did a great job of managing that Braves bullpen. Yeah, Graham Dayton had to go ahead and take one for the team. What is his last name? Is it pronounced Inoa?
Inoa.
Yeah. Inoa did a great job. He really said, if you were listening to the broadcast, which I know a lot of you don't want to listen to Joe Buck and John Smoltz, but they were talking about earlier in the game that Culberson was going to end up pitching in that game, right? The Braves didn't have to do that, and I, for one, I don't want to see a position player, unless it's Russell Martin, I don't want to see a position player, pitch. So I think it's huge that the Braves didn't. We saw Shane Green towards the end of the game, and he seemed to have handled the Dodgers lineup that inning that he pitched. But the Braves didn't use their leverage guys. So the Dodgers didn't use their high leverage guys. The Braves didn't use their high leverage guy. Tomorrow's game, I think, is going to be very intense. And again, I'm hoping that Kershaw is okay and he can give us some length.
Well, and if Kershaw, going to tomorrow's game, if Kershaw goes out there and does what Clayton has done during this postseason, I'm expecting, and that's the thing, is with a back injury, whether it's Clayton Kershaw or whether it's, we'll say Walker Buehler, just for argument's sake, especially with a pitcher that has history in the postseason, if you will, a back injury could kind of, make it or break it, right? Especially, and hopefully, and obviously they haven't really been, vocal, I guess, about how bad the spasm was. But for the most part, everyone's saying that it's likely that Kershaw's going to go tomorrow. All things considered, that's the guy. Cool. So if that ends up being the case, which is, everyone's kind of, preconceived notion, if he can go out there and give 5, even 6 innings, I think that's a quality start if he only gives up 1 or 2 runs. Especially with this lineup that the Braves have. The Braves again, they're a good team, and if Clayton can contain them, that's kind of for me the indicator of like, okay, he's fine. If he goes out there and he does, I suspect there, the way that Dave was talking last night, 5-75 or 6-95, kind of like what Julio, did tonight. If Clayton can do that, that's a quality start. If he keeps the walks to a minimum, and he doesn't, in my opinion, he doesn't have to have a high strikeout count either. As long as he can keep the runs, down to 1 or 2 runs, that's the perfect start. What's going to be interesting to see tomorrow is if the Dodgers can keep this momentum going into, against the start tomorrow against Bryce Wilson. Because like you said, it definitely seems like the Dodgers felt comfortable coming out first and just getting to it and padding that lead. And all credit in the world to Mookie for being aggressive. Right out the gate, swinging at the first pitch, and that was a hell of a play by Freddie Freeman. I mean, most first basemen that are right-handed don't make that play. And that's a hell of a play. And it was such a bang play that at first I thought, oh, Mookie's out. There's no way that he's safe. But obviously with the luxury of challenges now, by that much. Like it wasn't a lot, but I mean, hey, at this point, like you said last night, we'll take it any way that we can to kind of get it going into where it's at. If you were to kind of put I guess, obviously I gave you my indicator, what would be your indicator for Clayton tomorrow for what would be either a successful or a quality start?
There's 2 things I'm looking for with Kershaw. Tomorrow, in that first inning, what I'm looking at is his velocity. His fastball, actually, he's been throwing a lot harder this year. And if his velocity is dipping in this game, especially if that velocity is dipping in that first inning, then I don't think he's right. I think his back is bothering him. So, but it could be, I mean, when we were talking about off the air yesterday, I mean, they were probably shooting him up with every drug known to man. So hopefully you hope that the adrenaline will go ahead and keep that speed up. So I'm looking for that first velocity. The other thing I'm looking for is the home run ball. Kershaw has been suspect with a home run ball. But, usually it's solo home runs. And I can live with solo home runs, You want to go ahead and limit the damage. What you don't want to see is what happened to the Braves in this inning, where you're getting 3-run home runs, you're getting grand slams, right? This game needs to be close at this point because you just never know. Sometimes with the Dodgers, whenever they face somebody they've never seen before, they make them look like he's Cy Young, right? So I think it's really important that Kershaw's velocity is up, and that second of all, that he avoids, the solo home runs I can live with. It's just I hopefully he can avoid the home run ball here.
And just a reminder, Clayton pitched almost a week ago now, if not more. Against the show pods, as you call them, the San Diego Padres. And let's not forget, he gave up 2 home runs in that appearance. Overall, though, they were single bombs. And it's one of those things where in the postseason, again, anyone and everyone can live with those single home runs, right? But he had a quality start as far as that went too. Went 6 innings, had 6 strikeouts, and no walks. So that's kind of the Kershaw that I'm hoping we see tomorrow. As far as that goes, as long as there isn't any lingering effects of back injury, because as you know, Kershaw's notorious for having that ailing back that that kind of goes on the DL/IL since it's carried over, and in some cases he's missed a significant amount of time. So I'm hoping, it's and knowing these Dodgers how pragmatic they are, I don't think they're just going to push him out there just because they need that horse, because they obviously have the depth. It's one of those things where they know and they feel comfortable with putting him out there. So that's why I'm hoping, and if I'm honest, I'm expecting, especially after tonight, with that momentum shift, 5 to 6 innings in that realm of, if he does give up any runs, hopefully they're just a couple single home runs, and then we're good to go, and then we get to that bullpen. What I'm curious also to see tomorrow, and again, we beat the bullpen horse to death so hard, and that I think tonight they kind of, had that redemption tour, if you will. Granted, it's only one game, it's only a handful of innings, so you can't necessarily say, hey, we're back, baby. It's just a matter of, the comfort level being different. With Kenley, I'm curious as to, we saw what Kenley did tonight. and he looked, for all things considered, he looked great. The velocity wasn't there, was the thing that I was concerned with. With Kenley, how do you think after you saw him now in that scenario, how do you think they're going to use him now moving forward?
Look, if things are going right for the Dodgers, we're not going to see Kenley Jansen tomorrow. In my perfect scenario, I think if Kershaw can give us 6, we go to Gratterall, we go to Blake Trinan, we go to Victor Gonzalez. All right? If it's not Blake Trinan, it's Joe Kelly. I think if we don't, I don't think Jansen is there yet, and we haven't seen Jansen in a high pressure situation. Today he came in there, he had a huge lead, he had nothing to lose. If tomorrow's game is a lot tighter, I don't feel comfortable putting Jansen right back in another situation like that, especially since it's Game 4, and especially since we don't know what's going to happen with Buehler. I mean, at this point, is Buehler going to go in Game 5? Because if Buehler goes in Game 5, does that mean we're bringing Gonsolin for Game 6, and then Game 7 is just going to be a bullpen game? It's going to be all hands on deck. I mean, that might be the scenario, but for me, I think, I hate to say this, but we have to pick and choose our moments when they use Jansen, and I think the less we see Jansen in the series, the better it is for the Dodgers.
And I honestly think it's also going to depend on what happens tomorrow as far as what the rotation does. Because technically, Walker would be on regular rest on Friday. And again, we haven't really heard anything coming out as far as anything odd happening with that blister coming from that start on Monday. I'm expecting him to go on Friday, if I'm honest with you. Just to kind of get everyone on regular rest. But it all depends really on what happens tomorrow. I think as weird as it sounds, I think tomorrow is the defining moment of this series. If the Dodgers go out and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a dominant victory again like tonight. I don't think that they're going to get 11 runs again in the first inning. I don't think that that's going to happen again probably in this entire series again. Well, I think that they'll get 11 runs total in a game. Yeah, that's possible. But in an inning, I'm not expecting that. But I think if the Dodgers can go out there and play this level of not only just small ball, manufacturing runs, but kind of using the home run to their advantage when they can. I think that going into Friday, it will go Walker again, and then from there, it just kind of depends on where everything's at with Kershaw. I could definitely see them using Kershaw on short rest just to kind of keep the momentum going. But at the same time, wouldn't surprise me if they went Dustin May. It's one of those things where that's where as we've talked about, the Dodgers are for sure relying on their depth, not only on the bench, but in that pitching staff. To be able to go ahead and kind of do this as far as shutting it down, even though they're behind. But overall, though, I think tonight, aside from the fact that it was a blowout, the Dodgers for sure not only needed that, but I think it reinvigorated this Dodgers team that for sure kind of needed to be reminded how good they are. I think a little bit of it, like we've talked about over the last couple of days, is they have really felt tight, if you will. And I think tonight them loosening it up was great. On the flip side, on the other side of it all, the Braves themselves, they still try to grind it out. They still were fighting, really, if you think about it, even in the ninth. Do you think that would be? Do you think it's possible, if you will, have that Freaky Friday, kind of scenario where that maybe turns into something for the Braves tomorrow?
And it could, especially if Kershaw's not right. And that's why I agree with you how important tomorrow is. I really think the Dodgers need to capitalize on Game 3, 4, and 5. Only because the Braves pitching situation is kind of up in the air, right? Because it's like, what are they going to do in Game 5? Do they bring Max Fried to go Game 5? I mean, this is the luxury that the Braves have that the Dodgers don't right now. The Braves have a game in their back pocket, right? So they can hold off Max Fried for Game 6 and then throw Ian Anderson in Game 7, right? The Dodgers don't have that luxury, right? Because we're playing catch up. So I mean, the Braves are good, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact. I think a lot of times, especially talking to Dodger fans, they just automatically dismiss the opponent, and they just feel like the Dodgers are the ones beating themselves. Hey, the Braves have a lot to do with that. The Braves are the ones that are, making it harder for this Dodger offense. And as I said, good pitching usually always beats good hitting. So you have to give credit to the Braves, and then you saw it today. They made Julio work. Julio couldn't put these guys away. Even though they were down 11-0, they were still working the counts. They were still, pitching, fouling pitches off. So, I expect that the Braves are going to bounce back. I want to see how they react to this ass kicking that they got today. And I fully expect it to be back in there. But again, it's the Kershaw's is the really big question mark, because let's say Kershaw's not right and you only give one inning out of Kershaw. Now we're going straight to the bullpen. So that's my concern in this series is we're using our relievers, and no days off again. This is a series with no days off, and the more they see these relievers, these Braves hitters. You saw Camargo; he was hitting the ball really hard. He just couldn't straighten it out. He hit a foul ball. So it's not like the Braves lack confidence, right? This was just today was not their day, and it happens in big. So the Dodgers need to be ready, but it's really just it's on Kershaw. How many times as Dodger friends have we said, we're putting it in Kershaw's hands, and that makes me nervous.
And to confirm, Dave Roberts just announced that Kershaw will be going tomorrow. That's official. And to your point with Kershaw, I've said this before on here. I think I said it in the previous show. I say this with not even just like some sort of like pessimism. I don't think that we've actually ever seen postseason Kershaw, just because of they ran into the Astros / Asterisks, the Red Sox, and they have their own scandals, and that was obviously the low light, if you will, of Kershaw. I think the Kershaw that we're seeing now is playoff Kershaw. And a part of it, too, is this odd pandemic season with it being so short. Right now, he'd be going into midseason form, right? So I think that's been a huge driver to getting Kershaw where he's at. Because, let's be honest, his stats are for the postseason are preposterous. 2-0 record, 1.93 ERA, 0.71 whip on 14 innings pitched with 19 strikeouts. That's postseason stats. We're not talking. We're not even bringing the regular season of this year into the fray. That's this current postseason. So to see that level of Kershaw, where we saw the dominance of it during the Cy Young MVP year, which feels like it was a decade ago. But it's one of those things where now I think he's also feeling comfortable with having Walker Buehler kind of be the de facto ace, if you will, and Kershaw not having to have that pressure kind of weighing on him. And I think that's why I think I'm expecting Kershaw tomorrow, with them definitely saying he's going tonight. That tells me that they feel as close to 100% as he's going to be. And if we're honest, right now, when you go into this portion of the season, whether it's 60 games or 162, everyone has something hurting. Everyone's sore. Everyone's got something, that lingers. So that's why for me, if it was just spasm, which it sounds like that's kind of what they've indicated it was, it's one of those things where it's like he's done his part to work through it, and I hope that tomorrow we see Clayton Kershaw, the jaw face Clayton Kershaw, if you will, that'll go out and give us 6 quality innings. Again, doesn't need to give us 10 strikeouts or 12 like how he did the other night, but if he can go out and just give us those quality, that quality start, get it going, and like you said, get to the Blake Trinans, get to the Joe Kellys, the Bruce Gratterols, the Victor Gonzalez's, those guys for those high leverage situations, then obviously when that's happening, then the Dodgers are on the trajectory to win that game and to fully turn the series around. Because to me, this is I really do think that tomorrow the Dodgers are going to go into that game like it's an elimination game, so that way they can just kind of get everything motivated and get all the cylinders firing. And like you said, with them leading off, I think is going to be a huge, huge advantage for the Dodgers. Kind of backtracking a little bit, though, to the beginning of the game, Mookie Betts, who had been kind of hard on himself, earlier in the day, he talked, like you had said yesterday, that you felt that Mookie may have, kind of slowed down on the one play that ended up going into the corner. He came out today and he said, you know what, I think I definitely could have played that a little harder. I definitely, slowed it down a little bit. I needed to get it going. And likewise in the leadoff spot, I need to do more. I need to be better. This is Mookie Betts, who's arguably the best right fielder in all of baseball, if not one of, right? And him holding himself accountable that way, and obviously he had the start that he had going tonight to kind of get it all started for everyone. How did you feel about Mookie's kind of take on himself to what the results were tonight?
Look, I love that attitude. You can always be better. I mean, the Dodgers scored 15 runs today. They had 16 hits. I would love for them to go in there tomorrow and go, we can do better. We can score 16 runs tomorrow. We can score 20 runs. I mean, that play that we were talking about, and we talked about it last night, if Mookie makes that catch, they don't score a run that inning. That's a 7-7 game in the ninth, if everything remains the same. It's a different ballgame. So I hope that the way that he's leading by example in the sense that he holds himself accountable. So now that these Dodgers will need to hold themselves accountable. And going to Kershaw, it would be great if we saw this amazing performance from Kershaw tomorrow. But if the Dodgers offense does what they're supposed to do, we don't need Kershaw to be great. I will take an average Kershaw. I will take Kershaw giving up 3 runs. And I think that's the thing that I love about this team is you got to pick up your teammate, right? That this whole mentality that we have where we want to point the finger, we lost because of this person, no, this is a team. When you lose as a team. When you win as a team. So I love Mookie's approach, and I hope it rubs off that way. And like I said, I think prior Dodger teams, I don't know if they would have responded the way they responded today. I do think that the mental makeup of this team is different. And if Mookie's the one that has something to do with that, great, but I really like their approach, and I can't wait for tomorrow. And I'm ready for Game 4 already.
Well, and I think that was kind of the kind of kick in the ass that everybody needed. Is Mookie, who signed this gargantuan contract not too long ago, comes over in this blockbuster trade, if you will, and he himself has even said, like, I don't want to be the face, I just want to go out there and do my job. And he's first one on the field, last one off. Everyone knows the documented workhorse mentality that Mookie has. I think that was kind of a part of the driver, especially with these young guys today, that was able to get it going. Because I forgot who it was. I can't remember who it was. It might have been like Chris Taylor or Jock Peterson, one of the two. But they both were like, yo, this dude makes a ton of money. And this dude's here taking infield, kind of doing the Jeter thing. One of my favorite thing about Derek Jeter, when I worked in the game, is when we'd get to New York, that dude would be the first dude taking infield, even though it wasn't mandatory. It was optional infield, but he was out there every single day working on stuff because, he himself had been on the record saying you can only get better with more reps. And Mookie is doing just that too, right? You see him in the infield. He previously had played in the infield. So I think having that, that guy at the top of the lineup, and obviously, to everyone outside of that clubhouse, it's the Mookie Betts, team, if you will. But in that clubhouse, you have all-stars, perennial MVP candidates, et cetera, et cetera. But Mookie is kind of the guy that's set, helping further set the culture with JT to be able to get these guys going. Because again, Corey Seager, white hot, he's killing it right now. Cody Ballinger, he's turning it around. It's documented that Mookie had worked with Austin Barnes this year, and Roger, who's our producer / head of this operation, refers to Austin as Baby Mookie. So it's it's that trickle down effect, if you will, of having a guy like that not only at the top of your lineup, but for him to publicly come out and say, hey, I dropped the ball on this. That's on me. I can be better. And he went out and hustled the play today that indicated that, because if he doesn't hustle that play, who knows how that inning even goes. So it's, for me, that was a huge catalyst going into that. Going into tomorrow, obviously we know we have kind of an idea of what the lineup might be. Obviously today they took out Pollock and they put in Edwin. If you were to kind of take a hot take, if you will, going into tomorrow about any changes to the lineup, what would that be?
Is Bryce a right-hander or a left-hander?
Righty.
He's okay. If he's right-handed, I'm running out the same lineup. Jock. Let's see what Jock and Edwin and Rios. Let's see if they really are hot. You got to ride the hot hand, and that's the thing that worries me about the Dodgers, right? And we talked about this, and that is their reluctance to ride that hot hand. If Jock had a good game, how many times in the regular season did it just drive us crazy when we saw someone have a good game and then the next day they sit, right? It's like we ourselves cool our own players off. So being the fact that Bryce is a right-handed hitter, I say let's throw that same lineup over there. Let's see, if Rios can get into one again. I don't think we can score enough runs against this Braves team. So I'm all out there for putting the most offensive lineup we can find.
Well, and it was interesting to see people on Twitter today, kind of, being upset that they pulled AJ Pollock. And by the way, I'm not ignoring you if I'm not looking at you. I'm literally just trying to find his right hand and left hand splits. But it was funny to see people like, oh, AJ Pollock being pulled for Edwin Rios, that's a garbage move, blah blah blah. Being the couch manager, if you will. Edwin Rios has preposterous bat speed. That's one thing that we've seen from him. He's got an electric bat. For me, though, what was an indicator of he's improving. I forgot what play it was. I think it was in the 7th. Edwin had that ball that kind of like popped up over him or whatever, and he was out there talking to himself. And he was kind of, you could tell he was kind of trying to, okay, you can do this. You're playing the hot corner, etc. For me, that's a part of the culture, but it's also one of those, like, these guys know the moment. These guys know kind of what's at stake. So if they ran out that same lineup tomorrow without AJ, I wouldn't be mad, in the sense that Edwin is still the hot hand, because one pitch, one bomb, and he's still going out there and doing the thing. Granted, he also had a walk, so he had 3 strikeouts. So that's kind of a bummer. But also, that's a guy that's coming off of a groin injury, kind of trying to recover. But for me, the hot hand that they need to ride as long as he can stay hot is Jock Peterson. Jock Peterson's today his performance was out of this world, and obviously, it's kind of documented as far as, the trade that never happened to now. It's one of those things where this dude very easily couldn't be here. But, he kind of carried, a good chunk of it all with 6 at-bats today on 4 hits, 3 RBIs, and he had himself a hell of a game. As far as, for you, if you were given the opportunity tomorrow against Bryce, who, his splits are, they're even, I would say, against lefties and righties. Not a huge difference. It's like 0.1, percent different. Would you keep Rios in the lineup as far as this goes, like you said? Or if you think that you might, AJ Pollock obviously is a little better defensively, would you want to go AJ Pollock in that?
Austin Barnes in the lineup. So for me, it'll be curious to see if it's just Austin Barnes for Will Smith is the change. I would like to see Chris Taylor in left field. I think an outfield of Taylor and Bellinger and Mookie, that's our best defensive outfield. So, and that means if we go second base, we're probably going to have to go with Kike. So I would like to see Rios in the lineup. Now, the issue at hand is if you are going to put Taylor out in left field and you're going to go with a defensive lineup, the issue we're going to face now is then Kike is going to play second, and that means who's your DH, Rios or Jock? And at this point, I have to agree with you. I think we have to go with Jock, and that means that Rios is going to sit. So because it's the playoffs, I tend to lean right now that we got to put our best defense on the field. Because even though today's game was a blowout, pitching and defense are the things that are going to win you a championship. So I would not be surprised. If you go with Taylor in left and Kike at second, and we see Jock as the DH.
No, and I agree. And by the way, Kike with the underrated sub of the game. He's always touted himself as a super sub, and I think that's pretty quality. But he went and played shortstop for a little while, and he looked very comfortable. So I mean, he's kind of further proving that he is definitely that Swiss Army knife. That if needed, he can come up big defensively because he does have some of the best defense. Obviously, Corey Seager, Muncy, they all have great gloves, but Kika can play just about anywhere on the diamond. So I agree with you. If they go defensive, Kike makes a lot of sense at second. The only concern I have with Chris Taylor is he's kind of cold right now.
Yeah.
And obviously you could see the frustration there at the end of his last at bat, where he struck out. He's trying to get something going. Right now, his current average is 0.91.
So would you go, let me ask you this: would you go then would you start Pollock in left and have Taylor as a late game defensive replacement?
I probably would. I mean, I do believe that sometimes guys need a day off, even in the postseason, just to kind of let the adrenaline settle a little bit and just kind of get going. I would give him the day off because at the same time he can have an electric bat. We've seen him hit those straightaway to center home runs, and so I would probably give him the day off and give AJ the nod as far as the start goes. Because AJ's defensive metrics aren't terrible either. He's a good defensive outfielder. He's got speed. I mean, he's got low key speed too for how big he is. So for me, it would make a lot of sense if they gave him the day off, right? But I think, as far as everything goes, it's one of those things where, with this is a guy we also have to remember that the Dodgers, the Dodgers, from what I can see as far as stats go, the Dodgers haven't seen him. He's only had a handful of starts in the big leagues. I believe he's had 9 games total in the big leagues. No, I'm sorry. He's had a total of 15 games in the big leagues, and he's got a career ERA in the big leagues of 5.91. So, again, but he's also young. He's a young guy that may, that's another thing that we have to remember with some of these guys that don't have the experience as a pitcher. He may get caught up in the moment. Kyle Wright, some of those guys in that situation when they're getting bombed, they make an adjustment. And Al Leiter today on MLB Network had a solid breakdown on him on how he makes adjustments when he sees and he feels how everything's going. He changes his arm slot a little bit, stuff like that. Kyle did not do that today. So that's how you know that they beat him up a little bit, and that's why, to Snitsker's credit, he pulled him when he pulled him instead of having him out there being the guy that takes it for the team, right? But in Grant Dayton, all the credit in the world to him too, because he ate that bullet, and that was a rough bullet. But with Bryce, I don't really know how to take on the road and at home stats currently because everyone's in the bubble. So it's going to be an interesting outlier. But in the first inning, he gets rocked. So, I mean, that's one of those things, too, where if the Dodgers come out and do the thing, he's going to be fine. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see which Bryce Wilson we see because, again, he's a young guy. I know he's got good stuff. These Braves know how to scout pitching. And obviously there's proof with Max Fried and Ian Anderson, because they very easily could have had issues going into this year with losing Cole Hamels. And I can never say his name, Mike Volkanovich, I think is how you say his name. He's on the taxi squad. That's a dude. That's a big leaguer. So they've had all these young guys step up, and we have to remember that when you get to the NLCS, those are the 2 best teams in the National League to that point, right? So these Braves, they're not pedestrian, and we can't look past it. And that's why I think, long point being, you have to go with the best defensive lineup that you can pull, but at the same time, keep it as balanced as you can offensively. And that's why I think AJ Pollock should start tomorrow.
All right.
And on that note, we will go ahead and wrap this up. We want to thank you all for joining us. Again, Dodgers win in a rout, 15-3. Let's hope that they can keep this momentum going into tomorrow. And again, the big storyline going into tomorrow and to kind of keep an eye on, Clayton Kershaw, 2-0 record in this postseason with a 1.93 ERA. The preposterous WHIP, 19 Ks throughout this postseason. 14 innings is what he's had. So, if you average it out, that's 2 starts at 7 innings. I'm not expecting him to go 7 innings tomorrow. Like we've talked about tonight, if a quality start for me, 5 to 6 innings, gives up 2, maybe 3 runs, and hopefully that offense can keep it going. If, again, thank you again. Please give myself or Juan a follow. Our Twitter handles are down here at the bottom somewhere. I can't see where it's at. I apologize. And likewise, we have a store. It's bleedlos.com. You get tight shirts like this. There's a sticker of Kobe with the Dodgers logo somewhere behind me. I don't know where. I can't. My screen's very small, so I apologize. R.I.P. Kobe. And again, thank you for joining us, Juan, my friend. Stay safe, and we will see you all tomorrow. Until then, talk to you tomorrow.